I've been driving big rigs through frozen highways for over 20 years. I've seen storms that would make grown men pray. But nothing, and I mean nothing, prepared me for what drives these roads when the temperature drops below zero. These aren't just stories. These are warnings from truckers who encountered something out there in the frozen dark. Something that knocks when no one's there. Something that follows you in mirrors. Something that never stopped driving, even after death. If you're a trucker, pay attention. If you drive at night, watch till the end. Because what you're about to hear might just save your life. These are the 10 most disturbing, bone-chilling frozen highway trucker horror stories ever told. I've been driving big rigs for 15 years, hauling everything from electronics to livestock across North America. I've seen storms that would make most people pull over and pray, but nothing, and I mean nothing, prepared me for what happened on Interstate 90 in Montana that January night. It was a Tuesday, around 11 p.m., when I left Billings with a full load of refrigerated goods bound for Spokane. The weather report had mentioned snow, but out here, snow is just part of the job. You learn to respect it, prepare for it, and push through it. But by midnight, what started as light flurries had transformed into a full-blown blizzard, the kind where your headlights just bounce off a wall of white, and you're driving more by instinct than sight. Visibility dropped to maybe 10 feet. I slowed to a crawl, gripping the wheel so tight my knuckles ached. The wind howled like something alive, rocking my trailer with violent gusts. My CB radio crackled with warnings from other drivers, most of them already pulled over, waiting it out. I should have done the same. By 2 a.m., I couldn't see the road at all. I found what I thought was a shoulder and pulled over, keeping my engine idling so the heater would run. The temperature outside had dropped to 15 below, and even inside the cab with the heat blasting, I could feel the cold trying to seep in through every seal and gap. I made myself a thermos of coffee, checked my phone. No signal, of course, and settled into my seat. The wind screamed outside, and snow piled against my windows so fast I could watch it accumulate in real time. I figured I'd wait an hour, maybe two, until the worst passed. That's when I heard it. Knock, knock, knock. 3 slow, deliberate knocks on my passenger side door. I froze, coffee halfway to my lips. My first thought was another driver needing help, but something about those knocks felt wrong. Too measured, too patient. I leaned over and peered through the passenger window. Nothing but swirling white chaos. No figure, no silhouette, nothing. The snow was falling so thick that even if someone was standing right there, I'm not sure I would have seen them clearly. I sat back, telling myself it was just ice falling from the trailer or debris kicked up by the wind. But my hands were shaking. Then it happened again. Knock, knock, knock. Same rhythm, same door, same deliberate spacing between each knock. Hello, I shouted, my voice sounding small and pathetic against the roar of the storm. No response. I grabbed my flashlight from the center console and cracked the passenger window about an inch. The cold hit me like a physical blow, stealing my breath. I shined the light out into the storm, sweeping it back and forth. That's when I noticed something that made my blood run cold. There were no footprints in the snow. Fresh powder covered everything around my truck. The ground, the road, the shoulder. If someone had walked up to knock on my door, there should have been tracks. Deep ones in snow this heavy. But there was nothing. Just smooth, undisturbed white stretching out into the darkness. I slammed the window shut and locked both doors, even though they were already locked. My heart was hammering in my chest now. I reached for my CB radio, switched to the emergency channel. This is eastbound driver at mile marker 174 on I-90, requesting assistance. Is anyone out there? Static. Just empty, crackling static. I tried again. Same result. Then the knocking moved. It started at the back of my cab, just behind my head, then traveled along the length of my trailer. Knock, knock, knock. Slow and methodical, like someone was walking alongside my rig, dragging their knuckles against the metal. I could hear it clearly even over the storm, that hollow, metallic sound of something striking the side of my trailer. I grabbed my side mirror control and angled the mirror to try to see what was back there. The mirror was covered in ice and snow, but I could just barely make out a shape in the swirling white. A figure, standing just outside the reach of my running lights. I couldn't make out details, the storm was too thick. But I could see the outline. Person, standing perfectly still in 15 below zero weather in the middle of a blizzard. My mind raced. Maybe it was someone whose car had broken down. Maybe they were hypothermic, delirious, trying to get my attention. I should help them. That's what you do out here. You help each other. But something kept me frozen in my seat. Some primal instinct screaming that this wasn't right. The figure moved closer. I could see it better now in my mirror. Pale. Impossibly pale. No coat, no hat, no gloves. Just bare skin, blue-white in the dim light. And it was staring directly at my mirror, directly at me. Its eyes were hollow, dark pits in a face that looked like it had been carved from ice. Knock, knock, knock. This time on my driver's side door, right next to my head. I didn't think. I just reacted. I slammed my foot on the gas, released the brake, and my truck lurched forward. The tires spun on the ice for a heart-stopping second before finding purchase. My trailer fishtailed wildly as I accelerated, the back end sliding left and right as I fought for control. I didn't look back. I kept my eyes forward, both hands on the wheel, driving blind through the whiteout at speeds that should have killed me. I expected to slide off the road, to jackknife, to feel that sickening moment when you lose control completely. But somehow I stayed on the pavement. I drove for 40 miles without stopping, without slowing down, my heart trying to beat its way out of my chest. The storm finally started to break around 4 a.m., visibility slowly improving. When I saw the lights of a truck stop near Missoula, I nearly cried with relief. I pulled in, killed the engine, and just sat there shaking for 10 minutes. Finally, I climbed out to inspect my rig, checking for damage from my reckless drive through the storm. Everything looked okay until I walked around to the back of my trailer. The doors were covered in handprints, dozens of them frozen into the metal. Pale, frost-covered prints with elongated fingers, pressed so hard into the surface that they'd left impressions in the steel. They were everywhere, on the doors, on the sides, even on top of the trailer, like something had been crawling all over it. I stood there in the parking lot as the sun started to rise, staring at those prints, trying to convince myself there was a rational explanation. A mechanic from the truck stop came out to see what I was looking at. He stopped dead when he saw the handprints, his face going pale. "Jesus Christ," he whispered. "Where were you driving last night?" "I-90, near mile marker 174. "Why?" He shook his head slowly. "You need to come inside. I need to show you something." In the truck stop office, he pulled up an old newspaper article on his computer. The headline read, "Trucker vanishes on I-90 during winter storm." The article was from 3 years ago. A driver named Michael Granger had disappeared during a blizzard on the exact same stretch of highway. They found his truck a week later, engine still running, but Michael was gone. They searched for months but never found a body. The mechanic scrolled down to a photo. My blood turned to ice. There were handprints on Michael's trailer. Dozens of them, identical to the ones on mine. "They say something walks that stretch of highway when the blizzards come," the mechanic said quietly. "Looking for warmth, looking to get inside. Most drivers are smart enough not to stop." I looked down at my own hands, still trembling. "What happens if you let it in?" The mechanic closed the laptop. "No one who's let it in has ever reported back to tell us." I got back in my truck and drove straight through to Spokane without stopping. I took a different route back. I've never driven that stretch of I-90 again, and I never will. But sometimes, late at night when I'm driving through a snowstorm, I hear it in the back of my mind. Knock, 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 and I drive a little faster. Then she smiled. It was the most disturbing thing I've ever seen. Lips pulling back from teeth that seemed too white, too sharp, in a grin that was too wide for her face. I jerked my eyes back to the road, my heart hammering. "Listen, I'm just trying to help." When I looked back, she was gone. Just gone. The passenger seat was empty. My jacket lay there, soaking wet like it had been submerged in water. The The door was still locked. I could see the lock button was down. There was no way she could have opened the door and jumped out. Not at 60 kilometers an hour without me noticing. I slammed on the brakes, the truck shuddering to a stop on the shoulder. I threw it in park and jumped out, running back along the highway, scanning the snow-covered landscape on both sides. Nothing. No footprints. No figure walking away. No sign anyone had ever been there. I stood there in the brutal cold, my breath creating clouds around my head, trying to process what had just happened. Then I noticed the passenger seat through the open door. The vinyl was covered in water. No, not water. Ice water. Freezing cold liquid that was already starting to form crystals at the edges. And there was a smell, faint but distinct. The smell of stagnant pond water and rot. I got back in the truck, my hands shaking so bad I could barely grip the wheel. My GPS was acting strange, the screen flickering and showing my location jumping around erratically. According to it, I'd just driven in a complete circle, even though I knew I'd been heading straight down Highway 175. I tried the CB radio. This is southbound driver on 175, just north of, I don't even know where I am. Can anyone hear me? Static. Then a voice broke through. Another trucker. Yeah, I got you. What's your problem? I picked up a hitchhiker. A woman. She just vanished from my cab. Have you seen anyone walking along the stretch? There was a long pause. Then, what did she look like? I described her. Young, pale, wearing jeans and a sweater, no coat. Another pause, longer this time. Jesus, where exactly are you? Just past the Les Ecourses exit, heading south. You need to get out of there, right now. And don't stop again until you hit Rivière-à-Pierre. Why? Who was she? Not who. What? And I'm not talking about this on an open channel. Just drive. He wouldn't say anything else, and when I tried to call back, he didn't respond. I drove in a daze for the next hour, my mind reeling. The passenger seat slowly dried, but that smell lingered. Pond water and death. When I finally pulled into Rivière-à-Pierre, I stopped at a 24-hour garage. The old mechanic on duty took one look at me and poured me a cup of coffee without asking. You look like you've seen a ghost, he said. I almost laughed at that. I picked up a hitchhiker. She disappeared from inside my truck. He nodded slowly, like I just told him the time. Highway 175, north of here? Yeah. How did you? Happens every few years. Girl froze to death on that stretch back in 1998. Christine Moreau, 23 years old. Car broke down during a cold snap. She tried to walk to the next town. They found her body 2 days later, frozen solid, about a kilometer from where her car quit. I felt my stomach turn over. That was her. Driver's report picking her up. She gets in, doesn't talk, then vanishes. Usually leaves water behind. Some guys say she's still trying to get home. Others think she's trying to warn people. Don't stop on that highway in winter. Don't end up like her. But she was solid. I touched her. I gave her my jacket. He shrugged. The dead don't always know they're dead. Especially ones that died like that, slow, cold, terrified. Some part of her is still there, still trying to flag down help. Still hoping someone will save her. I spent the night in my truck in that garage parking lot. I couldn't bring myself to drive any further. When morning came, I examined the passenger seat in daylight. The vinyl was stained, watermarks that wouldn't dry, forming the outline of a person. And frozen into the fabric, so faint I almost missed them, were words. Help me. The mechanic offered to replace the seat, but I told him to leave it. I needed the reminder. I still drive Highway 175 sometimes. It's hard to avoid if you're hauling in Quebec, but I never drive it at night, and I never, ever stop for hitchhikers, because sometimes, when the temperature drops and the wind howls just right, I can still smell that pond water. And I wonder if Christine is still out there. Thumb out, hoping this time someone can actually save her. Hoping she can finally make it home. I learned early in my trucking career that you don't pick up hitchhikers. It's one of those unwritten rules that every veteran driver will drill into your head. Too many stories of robberies, assaults, or just plain weirdness. For 20 years, I followed that rule religiously. Until that night on Highway 175 in Quebec. It was late February. The kind of cold that makes your teeth ache and turns your breath into ice crystals. I was hauling timber from La Tuque down to Quebec City, a route I'd driven hundreds of times. The highway was nearly deserted at 1 a.m., just me and the frozen wilderness stretching out in every direction. The temperature gauge on my dash read -22 Celsius. With the wind chill, it was probably closer to -35. The kind of cold that'll kill you in minutes if you're not prepared. That's why I stopped when I saw her. She was maybe 50 yards ahead, illuminated by my headlights as I came around a curve. A young woman, early 20s maybe, standing on the shoulder with her thumb out. She was wearing jeans and a thin sweater. No coat, no hat, no gloves. Her arms were wrapped around herself, and even from a distance, I could see her shaking violently. My first instinct was to drive past. Don't pick up hitchhikers. That's the rule. But in cold like this, she'd be dead in an hour, maybe less. I pulled over about 20 feet past her and waited. In my mirror, I watched her shuffle toward my truck, moving stiffly like her joints had frozen. When she reached the passenger door, I unlocked it and pushed it open from inside. She climbed in without a word, moving with mechanical slowness. The cold rolled off her in waves, dropping the temperature in my cab by what felt like 10 degrees instantly. She sat rigidly in the seat, hands in her lap, staring straight ahead through the windshield. Her lips were blue, not just tinged blue, completely blue, like someone had painted them. Her skin was so pale it was almost translucent, with a grayish undertone that made me think of corpses I'd seen at funerals. "Jesus, you're freezing," I said, cranking the heater up to maximum and reaching behind the seat for my spare jacket. "Here, put this on." She didn't respond, didn't even look at me, just kept staring forward with glassy, unfocused eyes. I draped the jacket over her shoulders anyway. She was shivering so hard her teeth were chattering. I could hear them clicking together in a rapid, unsettling rhythm. "What the hell were you doing out there?" I asked, pulling back onto the highway. "You got a car breakdown? I can radio for a tow truck." Nothing, not even a glance in my direction. Her breath was visible even inside the heated cab, thick clouds of condensation that seemed wrong somehow, too dense, hanging in the air longer than they should. "Look, I'm heading to Quebec City. That work for you? Or I can drop you at the next town if you want." Still nothing. I kept glancing over at her as I drove, growing more uneasy by the minute. Something was deeply wrong here, but I couldn't put my finger on what. She hadn't moved an inch since sitting down. Didn't adjust the jacket, didn't rub her arms for warmth, didn't do any of the things you'd expect from someone who'd been freezing to death 30 seconds ago. And her eyes, God, her eyes were so empty, like looking into the windows of an abandoned house. "You okay?" I tried again. "Should I take you to a hospital?" For the first time, she moved, just her head, turning slowly to look at me. Her neck made a creaking sound like frozen leather. She opened her mouth, and I thought she was finally going to speak. But no sound came out. Her jaw just hung open, wider than seemed natural, and that clicking chatter of her teeth got louder, faster, more frantic. "That's impossible. Lots of things are impossible till they happen to you. Listen, son, the shadow rig only shows up before someone dies on that stretch of ice. It's a warning. Or maybe it's whatever's coming to collect. I don't know. But if you saw it, someone's going to crash tonight." That's insane. Maybe. But I've been driving these roads for 40 years. I've heard the stories. Hell, I saw it myself once back in '96. Followed me for 20 miles, then vanished. 2 hours later, I came up on a jackknifed semi that had gone through the median. Driver didn't make it. So you can think I'm crazy if you want, but I'd be real careful if I were you. The radio went silent. I tried calling back, but he didn't respond. I sat there idling on the shoulder, trying to decide what to do. Part of me wanted to turn around, find a hotel, and wait for daylight. But another part, the part that had been driving trucks for over a decade, told me I was being ridiculous. There had to be a rational explanation. Another truck, some trick of the light. Maybe I'd been driving too long and was seeing things. I put the truck in gear and continued west, but I kept my speed down and my eyes glued to the mirrors. Every time I saw headlights, my heart rate spiked, but nothing followed me. The rest of the drive was empty, quiet, normal, until I got the call. I'd stopped at a rest area near wall to use the bathroom and grab coffee. My phone had a signal again, and I saw I'd missed a call from my dispatcher. I called back. "Hey Tom, what's up?" His voice was strained. "Mike, I need you to sit down. I'm standing in a parking lot. What's wrong?" It's about Janet. There was an accident." Janet was my dispatcher's wife. She drove occasionally, hauling light loads for a small freight company. I'd met her a few times at company picnics. "What happened?" "She was driving eastbound on I-90 tonight. Hit black ice near mile marker 285. Truck went into a spin, jackknifed, went through the median. She didn't make it, Mike." The phone nearly slipped from my hand. Mile marker 285, right where the shadow rig had vanished. "When did it happen?" "They said around 3:30 a.m. I looked at my watch. It was 5:45. I'd seen the shadow rig at 3:15. "Tom, I'm so sorry. I don't know what to say." He was quiet for a moment. When he spoke again, his voice was hollow. "State Patrol said she'd been dead before they got there. Said she probably died on impact. I can't believe she's gone." We talked for a few more minutes, but I don't remember what was said. My mind was stuck on those headlights, that phantom truck following me, then disappearing right where Janet would crash 15 minutes later. I finished the delivery in a daze. On the drive back, I took a different route, added 3 hours to my trip, but I couldn't bring myself to drive that stretch of I-90 again. A week later, I was talking to another driver at a truck stop in Minnesota. He was an older guy, maybe 65, with the weathered look of someone who'd spent his whole life on the road. We got talking about weird experiences, and I finally told him about the shadow rig. He nodded knowingly. "You're not the first. Won't be the last. Have you seen it?" "Once. 1988. It followed me for 30 miles through a snowstorm, then vanished. An hour later, I came up on a wreck. Young couple in a car had slid off the road and hit a bridge pillar. Both dead. What do you think it is?" He shrugged. "Death, maybe. Or Death Scout. Something that rides the highways looking for who's next. The way I figure it, it shows itself to certain drivers, people who are supposed to see, supposed to remember. Maybe it's a warning. Maybe it's just how things work out here. Why trucks? Why highways? Think about it. How many people die on these roads every year? Thousands. Maybe tens of thousands. All that death, all that metal and speed and violence. It leaves a mark. Maybe the shadow rig is that mark. The ghost of every truck that's ever crashed, every driver who's ever died behind the wheel, all rolled into one. I thought about that for a long time after. It didn't make me feel better, but it made a kind of sense in the way that ghost stories always do, not logical but true on some deeper level. I still drive trucks, still run loads across the Dakotas when I have to, but I'm careful on I-90. Real careful. I watch my speed, give myself plenty of following distance, and I never drive faster than conditions allow. And I watch my mirrors, because sometimes, late at night on empty stretches of highway, I catch glimpses of headlights that don't quite behave right. Lights that follow too perfectly, that match my speed too precisely, that disappear without explanation. When I see those lights, I say a prayer for myself, for whoever's out there, for whoever the shadow rig has come to collect. And I drive very, very carefully until the sun comes up. Because out there in the frozen darkness, death drives a black semi with no markings. And when it gets on your tail, all you can do is hope you're not the one it's following. But someone is. Someone always is. The Dakotas in January are no joke. I've been running freight through that territory for 12 years, and I've learned to respect the ice. Black ice especially, that invisible killer that turns highways into skating rinks without warning. It's taken more drivers than I care to count. This particular run was routine, or should have been. I was hauling auto parts from Fargo to Rapid City, A straight shot across South Dakota on Interstate 90. I'd left at midnight to avoid traffic, which meant I'd be driving through the coldest part of the night when black ice is at its worst. By 3 a.m., I was about 60 miles west of Mitchell, and the temperature had dropped to 8 below zero. The highway stretched out empty and dark ahead of me, just my headlights cutting through the blackness. No moon, no stars, thick cloud cover had rolled in, making it feel like I was driving through a void. That's when I first noticed the headlights in my rearview mirror. Another semi, maybe a quarter-mile back, closing fast. Too fast for conditions like this. I could see the distinctive double lights of a big rig's headlamps, bright and getting brighter. I kept my speed steady at 55, about as fast as you can safely go when black ice is a possibility. But whoever was behind me wasn't being cautious. They were doing at least 70, maybe more. Idiot's gonna get himself killed, I muttered, watching the lights grow larger in my mirror. The rig closed the distance in less than a minute, pulling up maybe 20 feet behind my trailer. Way too close. Dangerously close. In conditions like this, you need at least 100 yards of following distance. I grabbed my CB radio. Northbound driver on I-90, mile marker 281. You're following way too close. Back it off. Static. No response. The headlights stayed locked on my bumper, so close I could barely see them in my mirror. Just a blinding white glare. I tried again. Seriously, man, you need to back off or pass me. You're gonna end up in my trailer. Nothing. I eased off the throttle, hoping he'd take the hint and go around me. My speed dropped to 45, then 40. The headlights stayed exactly the same distance behind me. Not falling back, not gaining, just perfectly matched to my speed. Now I was getting annoyed. I sped back up to 55. The lights matched me instantly. I slowed to 35. They stayed glued to my bumper. What the hell is your problem? I shouted into the CB, knowing he probably couldn't hear me but needing to vent. I tried adjusting my mirrors to get a better look at the truck behind me, but the headlights were too bright. I couldn't make out any details, no company logo, no trailer markings, no cab lights. Just those two blazing headlights burning into my mirrors. For the next 10 miles, it continued. The phantom rig stayed locked on my tail, never passing, never falling back, maintaining that terrifying 20-foot gap no matter what I did. It was like being chased by my own shadow. My hands were cramping from gripping the wheel so tight. Every instinct I had was screaming that something was wrong. This wasn't just an aggressive driver or some rookie who didn't know proper following distance. This was something else. The highway curved gently to the right. I took it carefully, aware of how quickly black ice can send you into a spin. My tires gripped and I made it through fine. Behind me, the headlights didn't follow the curve. They just went straight. I watched in my mirror as those blazing lights shot off the road into the prairie. Still perfectly level, still exactly the same brightness. They should have been bouncing, tilting, disappearing into the darkness as the truck tumbled or crashed. But they just glided straight out into nothing and then blinked out like someone had flipped a switch. I slammed on my brakes. Probably a stupid thing to do on black ice, but I wasn't thinking clearly. My truck shuddered to a stop on the shoulder. I grabbed my flashlight, climbed out into the brutal cold, and ran back to where the rig should have left the road. Nothing. No tire tracks. No torn-up prairie grass. No sign that any vehicle had left the pavement. The shoulder was covered in a thin layer of undisturbed snow, smooth and pristine in my flashlight beam. I stood there for a full minute, sweeping my light across the prairie, looking for any sign of the truck. The wind howled across the empty land, carrying stinging pellets of ice. There was nothing out there but darkness and cold. I climbed back in my cab, my heart hammering. My hands shook as I reached for the CB. Anyone out there on I-90? Did anyone else see that truck behind me? For a long moment, nothing. Then a crackling voice responded. An older man, sounded like he was driving too. Where are you, son? Just past mile marker 285, westbound. There was a truck following me, riding my tail for miles, then it just disappeared. A pause. Then, what did it look like? I couldn't see much, just the headlights. No markings, no lights except the headlights. Why? Another pause, longer this time. I could hear the hesitation in the silence. "You saw the shadow rig," he finally said, his voice quiet, like he didn't want anyone else to hear. "The what?" "Been stories about it for 30 years. Maybe longer. Black semi, no markings, no driver you can ever see. It shows up behind drivers on this stretch of highway, follows them for miles, then disappears. Always the same way. Just goes straight off the road like it's not even there." I felt my stomach tighten. Alaska in February is as remote and dangerous as places get in North America. I'd been contracted to haul drilling equipment from Anchorage up to Deadhorse on the Dalton Highway, 414 miles of some of the most isolated road in the world. No services, no cell coverage, no help if something goes wrong. I'd made the run twice before, so I knew what I was getting into, or thought I did. I left Anchorage just after noon, hoping to make it to Coldfoot Camp by nightfall. The Dalton doesn't mess around. It's narrow, winding, and in winter it's basically a ribbon of ice cutting through frozen wilderness. If you break down, you could wait days before another vehicle comes by. If you go off the road, you'll probably freeze to death before anyone finds you. The first few hours were routine. Spectacular scenery, endless snow-covered mountains, frozen rivers, forests of spruce trees bent under the weight of ice. But as daylight faded and darkness closed in, the landscape became hostile. The temperature dropped to 20 below, and the northern lights started dancing across the sky in eerie green waves. Around 9 p.m., about 200 miles north of Fairbanks, I turned on my CB radio. It's essential up here. Radio communication is often the only link to the outside world. Most drivers keep their radios on Channel 19, the unofficial trucker channel. I was listening to two drivers discuss road conditions ahead when another voice cut through. Female, young, speaking in a desperate whisper. "Please help me. I'm trapped. It's so cold." I keyed my mic. "This is northbound driver on the Dalton. Mile marker 203. Who's requesting help? Please, I can't feel my legs. It's so dark." Her voice was distorted by static, but the fear in it was unmistakable. My adrenaline spiked. "What's your location? Are you in a vehicle? Mile marker 213. Please hurry. I'm so cold." Mile marker 213 was only 10 miles ahead. I pressed down on the accelerator, pushing my speed up to 50, about as fast as you dare go on the Dalton at night. "I'm coming. Stay calm. Can you tell me what happened? Are you injured? In the truck. Can't get out. Door won't open. So cold. What color is your truck? What company? Please hurry." Her voice faded into static. I drove those 10 miles in a haze of urgency, scanning the sides of the road for any sign of a vehicle. When I reached mile marker 213, I slowed to a crawl, sweeping my spotlight across both sides of the highway. Nothing. No truck, no car, no person. Just empty road and dark forest. I stopped and grabbed my CB. "This is northbound driver at mile marker 213. I'm at your location. Where are you?" Static. Then her voice came back, weaker than before. "In the truck. Please. I can't feel anything anymore. I'm looking, but I don't see any truck. Are you off the road? Can you see my lights? Look down." Those two words sent a chill down my spine that had nothing to do with the temperature. I grabbed my flashlight and climbed out of my cab. The cold hit me like a wall. 20 below with a wind that cut through every layer I was wearing. I walked to the edge of the road and pointed my flashlight down. The Dalton Highway runs along ridges and cuts through mountain passes. In many places, there are steep drop-offs on either side. At mile marker 213, the drop-off was particularly severe, maybe 100 feet down to a frozen creek bed. My flashlight beam swept across the slope, and my breath caught. There was a truck down there. Half buried in snow, nose first in the creek, was a semi-truck. It was old, I could tell even from this distance. The paint was faded and rust showed through in patches. It had clearly been there for a long time. "Oh my God!" I whispered. I ran back to my CB. "I see you. I see your truck. I'm calling for help right now. Hurry, please. I'm so cold. I tried my satellite phone, one of the few pieces of technology that works in this remote area. It took 3 tries, but I finally got through to the Alaska State Troopers dispatch in Fairbanks. This is commercial driver on the Dalton at mile marker 213. I've got a truck down an embankment with a person trapped inside. Female driver, reporting extreme cold, possibly hypothermic. I need immediate rescue. The dispatcher's voice was calm but concerned. Copy that. Can you see the person? Are they responsive? I can't get down there. The slope's too steep and it's dark. But she's on CB radio. She's talking to me. What channel? Channel 19. A pause. Stand by. I waited, my heart pounding. On the CB, the woman's voice continued, fading in and out. Can't feel my hands. So dark. Please don't leave me. I'm not leaving, I said into the radio. Help is coming. Just hold on. The dispatcher came back on my satellite phone. Driver, we're showing no active emergency calls on channel 19 in that area. Can you confirm the truck is occupied? She's on the radio. I'm talking to her right now. We're sending a unit, but it'll be at least 3 hours. In the meantime, do not attempt to climb down that embankment in the dark. That's extremely dangerous. But I couldn't just wait. Someone was dying down there. I found a rope in my emergency kit, tied it to my truck's frame, and started down the slope. It was treacherous, loose snow over ice, nothing to grab onto. I slipped twice, nearly tumbling all the way down. When I finally reached the wrecked truck, I could see how old it really was. This wasn't a recent accident. The truck looked like it had been here for decades. The windows were completely frosted over, and snow had drifted up to the door handles. I'm here, I shouted. I'm right outside. I tried the driver's door, frozen solid. I wiped away frost from the window and shined my flashlight inside. The cab was empty. No driver. No person. Just a frozen, abandoned interior with snow that had blown in through cracks in the seals. The seat was covered in ice crystals. Icicles hung from the steering wheel. What the hell? I muttered. On my CB, her voice crackled again. Where are you? I can't see you. I'm right here, at the truck. But there's no one. Then I saw it. On the dashboard, partially buried in snow, was an old CB radio. And it was on. The channel indicator glowed faintly. 19. My hands shaking, I reached through a broken window seal and picked up the radio. It was frozen solid, covered in frost. The power cord was disconnected, dangling loose. But the radio was transmitting. Please help me. The voice came from the radio in my hand. Even though it had no power source, I dropped it like it was on fire and scrambled backward, nearly falling. My breath came in ragged gasps, creating clouds in the freezing air. I climbed back up to the road as fast as I could, rope burning through my gloves. When I reached my truck, I sat in the cab, heater blasting, trying to calm down. On the CB, her voice continued. Why won't you help me? It's so cold. I've been here so long. With shaking hands, I switched to a different channel. Her voice disappeared. I waited for the state troopers, afraid to turn the radio back to channel 19, afraid to hear that voice again. They arrived just after midnight, 2 troopers in a heavy-duty rescue vehicle. I told them about the truck, about the voice on the radio. They looked at each other in a way that told me they'd heard stories like this before. One of them, a grizzled veteran named Sergeant Miller, climbed down to examine the wreck. He was down there for maybe 10 minutes before climbing back up. That truck's been there since at least the early 80s, he said. We ran the plates. Belongs to a driver named Sarah Mackenzie. She went missing in February 1979. They found her truck 3 weeks later, but her body was never recovered. General assumption was she tried to walk for help and froze somewhere in the woods. But I heard her voice. She was calling for help. Miller nodded slowly. You're not the first. Every few years, someone reports hearing a woman on Channel 19 calling for help from mile marker 213. We've stopped responding in person unless someone claims to actually see a person. How is that possible? The radio in that truck has no power. The battery's been dead for 40 years. Can't explain it. But the Dalton has a lot of ghosts. This is one of them. He looked out at the darkness. Sarah froze to death alone, waiting for help that never came. Maybe part of her is still waiting, still calling out on the radio, hoping someone will hear. I heard her. She sounded so real, so scared. That's because she was real, and she was scared. When she died, all that fear, all that desperation, it left an imprint. You picked up an echo, a recording of her last hours playing on a loop. Can anything be done? Miller shook his head. We've tried having the truck removed half a dozen times. Something always goes wrong. Equipment breaks, weather moves in. One time the recovery truck went off the road. It's like that truck wants to stay there. Like she wants to stay there, still calling for help. After they left, I sat in my truck for a long time before continuing north. I thought about Sarah Mackenzie, trapped in her truck in 1979, calling on her CB radio until the cold took her. How long had she lasted? Hours? Days? Had anyone heard her calls back then? Or had she died alone with only static for company? I drove the rest of the night in silence, my CB radio off. When I made the return trip 2 weeks later, I approached mile marker 213 with dread. As I passed it, I glanced at my CB radio. It was off, but just for a second, I could have sworn I heard it. A faint whisper beneath the static. Please, help me. I've made 12 more runs up the Dalton since then. I always turn my CB off before mile marker 213. But sometimes, even with the radio off, I hear her voice. Faint, desperate, eternal. Still calling for help. Still waiting for someone to save her. Still trapped in that frozen moment 46 years ago when the cold closed in and the darkness came. They say the dead don't speak. But on the Dalton Highway on Channel 19, Sarah Mackenzie has been speaking for almost half a century. And she'll keep speaking long after I'm gone. Still calling. Still waiting. Still hoping that this time someone will finally come. The Trans-Canada Highway is one of the longest roads in the world, stretching from coast to coast across some of the most brutal terrain on the planet. I've driven almost every mile of it during my 23 years as a long-haul trucker, and I thought I knew every rest stop, every truck stop, every lonely stretch of pavement. But I'd never stopped at mile 112 before. It was a January night, temperature sitting at -30 Celsius before wind chill. I was hauling electronics from Winnipeg to Thunder Bay, running behind schedule because of a delay at the loading dock. I'd been driving for 9 hours straight and needed to take my mandatory break. Canadian law says you can't drive more than 13 hours in a day without rest. Around midnight, I saw the sign, rest area, 2 kilometers. I'd driven this stretch dozens of times and didn't remember a rest area here, but maybe I just never noticed it. I was exhausted, my eyes burning from staring at the highway through blowing snow, and I needed to stop. The rest area was small, just a parking lot, a single-story building with bathrooms, and a few picnic tables buried under snow. One other truck was parked there, a blue Peterbilt with its running lights off but engine idling. I could see the puff of exhaust in the frigid air. I pulled in, parked about 50 feet from the other truck, and killed my engine. In cold like this, you usually keep your truck running so the cab stays warm, but I only planned to be inside for 5 minutes. I grabbed my flashlight and headed for the bathroom. The building was old, cinder block painted a faded yellow, with one flickering fluorescent light over the entrance. The door was unlocked. Inside, it was colder than it should have been, like the heating hadn't worked in years. My breath fogged in front of me as I walked down the short hallway to the men's room. Empty. Just 2 urinals, 2 stalls, and a sink with a cracked mirror. The fluorescent lights hummed and flickered, casting weird shadows. Everything was clean but worn, like it had been abandoned for years and then recently reopened. I did my business and washed my hands quickly. The water was ice cold. When I looked up at the mirror, something felt off. The reflection showed the bathroom behind me, but for just a second, I could have sworn I saw someone standing in one of the stall doorways. I spun around. Empty. You're losing it, I muttered to myself. Need sleep. I dried my hands and headed back outside. The blue Peterbilt was gone. I stopped in my tracks. The parking lot was completely empty except for my truck. I'd been inside maybe 5 minutes. In that time, the other driver had started up, pulled out, and driven away without me hearing anything. The parking lot was silent except for the wind howling across the open space. Then I noticed something on my hood. A coffee cup. It was sitting right in the center of my hood, perfectly placed, and steam was rising from it. I approached slowly, my heart starting to pound. The cup was from Tim Hortons, white paper with the familiar logo. Fresh coffee, still hot enough to steam in -30 weather. I looked around the parking lot. No footprints in the snow except my own trail from my truck to the building and back. No tire tracks from the Peterbilt leaving. Nothing. "Hello," I called out. My voice was swallowed by the wind. No response. I picked up the coffee cup. It was real solid, warm in my hands. I popped the lid. Black coffee, no sugar, no cream. Still hot. This wasn't possible. To leave this on my hood, someone would have had to walk across the parking lot from the building or from another vehicle. They would have left footprints. And where did they get hot coffee? There was no vending machine in that building, no coffee maker that I saw. I set the cup back down and walked quickly to my truck, climbed inside, locked the doors. My hands were shaking as I started the engine. Something was very wrong here. I put the truck in gear and started to pull out. In my side mirror, I glanced back at the rest stop building. The lights were off, completely dark, like they'd never been on. But I'd just been inside. The lights had been on, flickering, but on. I stopped the truck and stared. The building sat in darkness, looking abandoned. The windows were boarded up. "No," I whispered. "No, that's not right." I threw the truck in reverse and backed up until my headlights were pointed directly at the building. The boards over the windows were old and weathered. There was a chain and padlock on the front door. A faded sign read, "Closed for renovations. Do not enter." But I just walked in. The door had been unlocked. Heart hammering, I grabbed my flashlight and climbed out. The wind had picked up, driving snow into my face. I approached the building slowly, flashlight beam shaking. The door was chained shut. The padlock was rusted solid, hadn't been opened in years. I pulled on it anyway. It didn't budge. I shined my flashlight through a gap in the boarded windows. Inside, I could see the hallway I'd walked down, but it was full of debris. Broken ceiling tiles, garbage, years of accumulated grime. It looked like no one had been inside in a decade. But I had been inside. 5 minutes ago. It had been clean, the lights were on. I backed away from the building, my mind refusing to accept what I was seeing. Then I remembered the other truck. The blue Peterbilt. I swept my flashlight across the parking lot. No tire tracks. The snow was smooth and undisturbed except for my own truck's tracks and my footprints. The other truck had left no mark at all, because it had never been there. I ran back to my truck, jumped inside, and drove. I didn't stop, didn't look back. I just drove, pushing the speed limit, desperate to put distance between myself and that rest stop. 10 miles later, I pulled into a 24-hour truck stop near Kenora. The lot was full of trucks, all lit up with drivers coming and going. Normal, safe. I stumbled inside and ordered coffee from the restaurant. My hands were still shaking. The waitress, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes, noticed. "You okay, Han?" I think I just had a really weird experience." She poured my coffee. "What kind of weird?" I told her about the rest stop at mile 112, about the other truck that vanished, about the coffee cup that appeared on my hood, about the building that was open and clean but then locked and abandoned. Her face went pale. "Mile 112. Yeah. Why?" She sat down across from me, which waitresses don't usually do. "You need to tell me exactly what the other truck looked like." Blue Peterbilt. No lights except running lights. Engine was idling. She closed her eyes. "Company logo? Any markings?" I thought back. Yeah. There was something on the door. Couldn't quite make it out in the dark, but it looked like a maple leaf and maybe some letters. Northern Star Transport? My blood ran cold. "How did you know?" She reached across the table and gripped my hand. That driver's name was Daniel Russo. He drove for Northern Star. 7 years ago, he stopped at that rest stop on mile 112. It was winter, cold like tonight. They found him 3 days later. He was still in his truck, frozen solid. Heart attack, they think. But his coffee was sitting on the hood of his truck, still steaming when they found him. No explanation for that. It should have been frozen solid after 3 days. That's impossible. They shut down that rest stop after Daniel died. Condemned the building. But drivers still report seeing it open, seeing lights on. Some say they've gone inside. And every time, someone mentions a blue Peterbilt parked in the lot. Why? Why is this happening? She shook her head. Some people think Daniel's still there, stuck in that last moment. Still taking his break, still sipping his coffee, not knowing he's dead. And maybe he's trying to warn other drivers. Maybe the coffee on your hood was his way of saying, don't stay here. I thought about that coffee cup, still sitting on my hood back at that rest stop. About the building that was clean and open for me but abandoned and locked when I tried to go back. Has anyone else died there? After Daniel? Her expression darkened. 2 more drivers. Both stopped there alone at night. Both found dead in their trucks days later. Natural causes, officially. But folks around here know better. We tell drivers to avoid mile 112. Use the rest stop at mile 97 or push through to here. Don't stop at 112. I didn't know. There was no warning. There's never a warning. That's the problem. The rest stop looks normal, looks open. You don't know you've pulled into somewhere wrong until it's too late. I finished my coffee, real coffee, bought from a real waitress in a real truck stop. I waited until sunrise before continuing my drive. I needed daylight, needed to feel like the world made sense again. On my way back through a week later, I watched my mile markers carefully. At mile 110, I slowed down, looking for the rest stop. It was there. I could see it from the highway, the small parking lot, the yellow cinder block building. But something was different in daylight. The building was obviously abandoned, boarded up, chained shut, with no trespassing signs. And in the parking lot, partially buried in snow, was a truck. A blue Peterbilt. It had been there so long that snow had drifted halfway up the sides. The tires were flat. Ice covered the windows. It looked like it hadn't moved in years. I didn't stop. I drove past at 60 kilometers an hour, eyes locked on the road ahead. But in my rearview mirror, just for a second, I saw something that made my heart stop. The truck's running lights were on, and steam was rising from a coffee cup sitting on the hood. I called the Ontario Provincial Police from the next town, told them about the abandoned truck at mile 112. They said they'd look into it. 3 days later, I got a call back. The officer sounded confused. We checked out that location. There's no truck there, just an old closed rest stop. Are you sure about the mile marker? I'm positive. Blue Peterbilt, Northern Star Transport logo. It was right there in the parking lot. Sir, we had 3 units check that site. There's no vehicle there. There hasn't been for years. After we hung up, I sat in my truck thinking about Daniel Russo. About how he stopped for a break one winter night and never left. About how he's still there, still idling, still waiting for a dispatcher to call with his next load. I don't drive the Trans-Canada through that section anymore. I reroute, add hours to my trip, pay for the extra fuel. My company thinks I'm being superstitious, but they don't argue. I've been with them 23 years, and if I want to avoid one stretch of highway, they'll accommodate me. Because here's what I know. Rest stops are supposed to be safe havens for tired drivers. Places to sleep, to eat, to take a break from the endless highway. But the rest stop at mile 112 isn't a haven. It's a trap. A pocket of frozen time where Daniel Russo is still taking his break. Still sitting in his truck. Still holding a cup of coffee that never gets cold. And if you stop there, if you pull into that parking lot and turn off your engine, you might not leave. You might become part of whatever haunts that place. Another driver frozen in time. Another ghost waiting for a load that will never come. So if you're driving the Trans-Canada Highway through Ontario in winter, and you see a rest area at mile 112, don't stop. Keep driving, because Daniel's already stopped, and he's waiting for company. and his coffee is still hot. I've driven through every kind of weather you can imagine: rain, sleet, fog, snow, ice storms. But nothing prepares you for a true Wyoming whiteout. It's not just heavy snow, it's complete sensory deprivation. The world disappears. Up and down become meaningless. You can't see the hood of your own truck. And that's when it appeared. I was crossing the Wyoming plains on I-80, hauling agricultural equipment from Des Moines to Salt Lake City. The weather report had mentioned light snow, but Wyoming weather is notoriously unpredictable. By the time I was 20 miles east of Rock Springs, light snow had transformed into a raging blizzard. Visibility dropped from a quarter mile to 50 feet to nothing in the span of 10 minutes. I slowed to a crawl, turned on my hazard lights, and tried to keep the truck between what I thought were the lane markers. Other drivers were pulling off the road, parking on the shoulder to wait it out. I should have done the same, but I was behind schedule, and my dispatcher had been pressuring me to make up time. So I kept going, creeping forward at maybe 15 miles an hour, praying I wouldn't run into stopped traffic or veer off the road. That's when I saw someone walking in the middle of the highway. At first, I thought my eyes were playing tricks. Through the swirling white, I could make out a figure moving slowly across my lane, walking from the shoulder toward the center of the road. I laid on the horn. A long, sustained blast. The figure didn't react, didn't turn, didn't hurry, didn't acknowledge the sound at all. I hit my brakes, felt the truck start to slip on the ice beneath the snow, and eased off before I lost control. The figure was maybe 30 feet ahead now, and I could see more details. It was wearing what looked like a hospital gown. Light blue, thin fabric, the kind that ties in the back. No coat, no pants, bare feet in the snow. What the hell? I whispered. I stopped the truck completely, about 20 feet behind the figure. It continued walking, slow and deliberate, heading toward the center line like it was going to cross to the southbound lanes. I rolled down my window, the cold and snow immediately blasting into my cab. "Hey!" I shouted. "Get in. You'll freeze." The figure stopped. Slowly, so slowly it was unnatural, it turned to face me. I couldn't see its face clearly through the whiteout, but I could see enough to know something was wrong. The proportions were off. The head was too smooth, too featureless. I grabbed my flashlight and aimed it at the figure. What I saw made my blood turn to ice. It had no face. Where there should have been eyes, a nose, a mouth, there was just smooth, pale skin. Like someone had taken a mannequin and forgotten to paint on the features. The skin was paper white, almost translucent, with blue veins visible beneath the surface. But the worst part was that it was staring at me. Even without eyes, I could feel its gaze locked on me, cold and hungry. The figure started walking toward my truck. Not hurrying, just that same slow, deliberate pace. One bare foot in front of the other, leaving footprints in the snow that immediately filled in behind it. I slammed my foot on the gas. The tires spun on the ice for a heart-stopping second before catching. My truck lurched forward, the trailer fishtailing behind me. I fought for control, overcorrected, felt the back end start to swing around. In my side mirror, I could see the figure still walking toward me, keeping pace even though I was accelerating. Its arm reached out, fingers extended, and even though it was 20 feet away, I swear I could feel those fingers brushing against my door. I cranked the wheel hard, straightened out, and pushed the gas pedal to the floor. My truck picked up speed 30, 40, 50 miles an hour in a complete whiteout. I couldn't see anything, was driving completely blind, but I didn't care. I just needed distance between me and that thing. Something hit my passenger window. I screamed and jerked the wheel. The window didn't break, but there was a handprint smeared across the glass. Pale and frost-covered, with fingers too long to be human. It was on my truck. I could hear it now, scratching at the side of my trailer as I drove. Long, scraping sounds like fingernails or claws, dragging across metal. The sound moved from the passenger side to the back of my trailer, then up onto the roof. It was climbing on top of my truck. I hit my brakes again, hoping to throw it off. Big mistake. The truck went into a skid, the trailer swinging around to my left. I was jackknifing, losing control completely. For a few seconds that felt like hours, I wrestled with the wheel, pumping the brakes, trying desperately to keep the truck from flipping. The trailer swung 90 degrees to the cab before finally straightening out. I sat there gasping, heart hammering, truck at a complete stop in the middle of the highway in a whiteout. The scratching had stopped. I didn't hear anything on the roof. Didn't hear anything outside at all except the wind howling. Maybe I'd thrown it off. Maybe it had fallen when I skidded. Maybe it had never been there at all, and I was losing my mind from exhaustion and fear. Then I heard it right above my head. Scratch, scratch, scratch. Something was on top of my cab, directly over the sleeper compartment. I could hear it moving, shifting its weight. The metal creaked under pressure. Then a face appeared in my windshield, upside down, hanging over the top edge. The faceless face. Smooth white skin. No eyes, but somehow staring at me through the glass. Its mouth opened, or where a mouth should have been. The skin split open like a wound, revealing darkness inside. Not a throat or teeth, just empty blackness. It screamed. Not a human scream. Something else. A sound that was too high-pitched and too low at the same time. A sound that made my teeth ache and my vision blur. The windshield cracked, spiderweb fractures spreading from where its hands pressed against the glass. I didn't think. I just acted. I threw open my door and jumped out into the blizzard, leaving my truck running with that thing on top of it. The snow and wind hit me like a physical blow, immediately soaking through my jacket. I couldn't see more than 5 feet. I ran anyway, stumbling through knee-deep snow, having no idea where I was going. Behind me, I heard that scream again, closer this time. I ran harder, my legs burning, lungs aching from the cold air. I tripped over something buried in the snow and went down hard, face first into the freezing powder. When I rolled over, it was standing over me, the faceless figure in the hospital gown, looking down at where I lay in the snow. The split-open mouth gaped wider, that void of darkness reaching for me. I screamed and tried to crawl backward. My hand hit something metal, a guardrail. I grabbed onto it and pulled myself up, scrambling over it, and half fell, half slid down an embankment. I tumbled maybe 15 feet before hitting something solid, a concrete drainage culvert. I crawled inside, pressing myself into the dark, cramped space, pulling my knees to my chest. I waited. Minutes passed, maybe hours. Couldn't tell. The cold was seeping into my bones, and I knew if I stayed here much longer, I'd freeze to death. But I was too terrified to move. Finally, I saw lights, red and blue flashing lights cutting through the whiteout above me. Help! I screamed, my voice hoarse. Down here. Help! Flashlights appeared at the top of the embankment. 2 Wyoming Highway Patrol officers climbed down to the culvert. Sir, are you injured? One of them asked. There's something out there, I babbled. Something in the storm. It was on my truck. No face. It was. Sir, you're hypothermic. We need to get you warm. Can you walk? They helped me climb back up to the highway. The whiteout was starting to break. I could see maybe 20 feet now. My truck was right where I'd left it, door still open, engine still running. And there was nothing on it. No figure. No handprints on the window. The windshield wasn't cracked. But I saw it, I insisted as they wrapped a blanket around me. It was right there. It cracked my windshield. The officers exchanged glances. Sir, have you been driving for a long time without rest? I'm not hallucinating. It was real. The older officer, a man maybe 50 with weathered features, pulled me aside while his partner checked my truck. Listen, he said quietly. This is going to sound strange, but how would you describe what you saw? I told him. The hospital gown, the faceless head, the way it moved. He nodded slowly. You saw the Frostwalker. The what? Back in 1982, a patient escaped from the Wyoming State Hospital during a blizzard. Mental patient, they said. Unstable. He was wearing just a hospital gown. They found him 3 days later, frozen solid about 10 miles from here. But his face, he paused. The cold had done something to it. Frostbite, hypothermia, his features were gone. Just smooth skin. That was over 40 years ago. Yeah, but drivers report seeing him every winter when the whiteouts hit. Always the same, walking in the middle of the road, wearing a hospital gown, no face. And if you stop too long, he gets in. Gets in your truck, gets in your head. Some drivers are found days later, frozen in their cabs. Others make it out but are never the same. They keep saying they can feel him in there with them, watching from inside their minds. I looked at my truck, door still open, inviting. I left the door open. The officer grabbed my arm. Then you're not going back in that truck. My partner will drive it to Rock Springs. You're riding with me. But what if? If he's in there, we'll know soon enough. Better my partner than you. He's been trained to deal with this. We watched as the other officer climbed into my truck, closed the door, and drove it slowly down the highway. I rode in the patrol car, unable to shake the feeling that something had changed, that I'd crossed some invisible line and couldn't go back. At the Rock Springs station, the other officer was waiting. He looked shaken. Anything? The older officer asked. Temperature in that cab dropped to freezing, even with the heater blasting full. And I swear I could hear breathing from the sleeper compartment. But when I checked, there was nothing there. They had a priest come to the station. He blessed my truck, said prayers in the cab, sprinkled holy water on the seats. I don't know if it helped, but when I finally got back in the next morning, the temperature stayed normal. I finished that delivery, but I quit long-haul trucking a month later. I couldn't do it anymore. Couldn't drive through storms without remembering that faceless figure, without hearing that inhuman scream. I drive local now, day shifts only, never in bad weather, because I learned something on that Wyoming highway. Some ghosts aren't looking for vengeance or justice or peace. Some are just looking for warmth, for a way back inside, for a living body to inhabit because they can't accept that their own is long frozen. And the Frostwalker is still out there, still walking the highways when the whiteouts hit, still reaching for doors left open, still trying to get in. So if you're ever driving through Wyoming in winter, and you see someone walking in a storm wearing just a hospital gown, don't stop. Don't offer help. Don't open your door. Just drive. Because some people are beyond saving. And if you try to save them, they might just take you instead. Northern Ontario in winter is one of the most isolated places you can drive a truck. Endless forests of black spruce, frozen lakes that stretch to the horizon, and highways that go for 100 miles without seeing another vehicle. It's beautiful in a harsh, unforgiving way, but it's also where I learned that some sounds should never be answered. I was hauling lumber from Hearst to Thunder Bay on Highway 11, a route I'd driven maybe 50 times over my 15-year career. It was late January, around 1:30 in the morning, and the temperature had dropped to -35. The kind of cold where your breath freezes in your nostrils, where exposed skin gets frostbite in under 2 minutes. The highway was empty. Just me and the darkness and the endless tunnel of trees caught in my headlights. I had the radio on, listening to a talk show from Toronto when I heard it. A child crying. At first, I thought it was coming from the radio, maybe part of a commercial or news story. But when I turned the volume down, the crying continued. Faint but clear. A child's sob, broken and desperate. I looked around my cab. The sound wasn't coming from inside the truck. It was outside. I slowed down, rolling down my window an inch despite the brutal cold. The crying got louder. It was definitely outside, somewhere off to the right side of the highway. What the hell? I muttered, pulling onto the shoulder. I grabbed my flashlight and climbed out. The cold hit me like a hammer, stealing my breath. I zipped my jacket all the way up and pulled on my gloves, then swept my flashlight across the tree line. The crying was clearer now. A child, maybe 5 or 6 years old, sobbing like their heart was breaking. It was coming from about 30 feet into the trees. "Hello," I called out. "Is someone there? Are you hurt?" The crying continued, but there was no answer. Every instinct told me to get back in my truck and drive away. No child should be out here miles from any town, in the middle of the night in deadly cold. This wasn't right. But if there really was a child out there, they'd be dead in minutes. Couldn't just leave. I started into the trees, following the sound. The snow was deep, up to my knees in places, and I had to push through drifts that grabbed at my legs. My flashlight beam cut through the darkness, illuminating nothing but trees and snow. The crying stayed ahead of me, always just out of sight. I followed it deeper into the forest, calling out, "I'm here to help. Where are you?" The sobs were getting closer. I could almost see the source, just ahead, maybe 20 feet, behind a cluster of spruce trees. I pushed through the branches, snow cascading down on me, and emerged into a small clearing. The crying stopped. In the center of the clearing, sitting in the snow with its back to me, was a small figure. A child wearing what looked like a winter coat and snow pants. Dark hair hung down past its shoulders. Relief flooded through me. "Hey, it's okay. I'm here to help. Are you lost?" The figure didn't move, didn't turn around. It just sat there, perfectly still, in snow that should have been freezing it to death. I moved closer, my boots crunching in the snow. "Can you hear me? Are you hurt?" Still no response. I reached out, my gloved hand almost touching the child's shoulder, turned its head, not its body, just its head, rotated 180 degrees, neck twisting in a way no human neck should twist, until it was looking at me over its own back. The face was wrong, too pale, almost blue-white, like flesh that had been frozen for days. The eyes were too large, bulging slightly from their sockets, completely black with no visible iris or pupil. The lips were cracked and peeling, pulled back from teeth that seemed too sharp, too many. And it smiled, a wide, impossible smile that split its face almost ear to ear. Then it screamed. Not a child's scream. This was something primal, something ancient and wrong. It was so loud I could feel it in my chest, vibrating through my bones. The sound went on and on, that gaping mouth locked open, that terrible smile never wavering. I stumbled backward, tripped over my own feet, and fell hard into the snow. The thing, because it wasn't a child, wasn't anything that had ever been human, stood up in one smooth motion. It didn't stand like a person. It unfolded, joints bending in wrong directions, rising to its full height, which was too tall, maybe 7 feet, impossibly stretched. I scrambled to my feet and ran. Behind me, I could hear it following. Not footsteps, more like something dragging through the snow. And that scream continued, echoing through the forest, seeming to come from all directions at once. I crashed through the trees, branches tearing at my face and clothes. My flashlight beam bounced wildly, showing me nothing but trees and snow and darkness. I had no idea which direction I was running, only that I needed to get away. Something grabbed my jacket from behind. I screamed and spun around, flailing with my flashlight. The beam caught it full in the face, that horrible stretched face with the black eyes and too wide smile. Its hand, fingers too long, too many joints, had a grip on my collar. I yanked free, leaving part of my jacket behind, and ran harder. My lungs burned from the cold air. My legs felt like lead, but terror pushed me forward. I burst out of the trees and nearly fell into the ditch beside the highway. My truck was there, maybe 50 yards to my left, engine still running, lights still on. I ran for it, expecting any second to feel those two long fingers grabbing me again. I reached the truck, threw open the door, and practically dove inside. I slammed the door and hit the lock button, then the gas pedal, not even bothering to check my mirrors. The truck lurched forward, tires spinning briefly on ice before finding traction. I didn't slow down until I'd put 20 miles between me and that clearing. When I finally pulled over at a rest stop near Smooth Rock Falls, I sat shaking in my cab for a full 10 minutes before I could even move. My jacket was torn where that thing had grabbed me. There were scratches on the side of my truck, long, deep gouges in the paint that hadn't been there before. And on my passenger seat was something that made my blood run cold. A small winter coat, child-sized, frozen solid, covered in frost. I grabbed it with shaking hands and threw it out the door into the snow, then drove straight to the rest stop office. The clerk was an elderly Cree man who took one look at me and poured coffee without asking. "You look like you've seen something you shouldn't have," he said quietly. I told him everything. The crying, the thing in the clearing, the chase through the forest. He nodded slowly, like he'd heard this story before. "Where exactly were you?" "Highway 11, maybe 20 kilometers south of Smooth Rock Falls." His expression darkened. "The old residential school was near there. Closed in 1973. "Residential school?" "St. Anne's. They took native children from their families, tried to civilize them. Beat them for speaking their own language. Starved them. Worse things that people don't talk about. A lot of children died there. Some from disease. Some from abuse. Some just disappeared." I felt sick. The child I saw. In 1971, there was a bus accident. School bus carrying 12 children back to St. Anne's after Christmas break. Hit black ice, went off the road. The bus went through the ice of a frozen lake. All 12 children drowned in the freezing water. They recovered the bus, but only found 11 bodies. The 12th child was never found. Jesus Christ. They say those children still wander the forest near where the school stood. Still crying, still looking for their families, not understanding why no one came to save them. Most people who see them say they look normal at first, just lost children. But when you get close, he paused. The cold and the trauma did something to them, changed them. They're not the children they were. They're what the cold and the fear turned them into. What do they want? Warmth, company, someone to take back with them so they're not alone. If you'd stayed in that clearing much longer, if you'd let it touch you for more than a second, you might not have made it back to your truck. What would have happened? He looked at me seriously. Other drivers have been found out there, frozen solid, sitting in the snow like they were waiting for something. No signs of struggle, no indication of how they got so far from their vehicles. They just stayed, like something convinced them to sit down in the snow and wait. I thought about that coat on my passenger seat, about how it had appeared there, inviting, like it wanted me to pick it up, to put it on. "If you see them again," the clerk continued, "don't stop, don't try to help. Those children are beyond help. They died alone and scared and cold, and that's all they know now. They'll drag you into that same death if you let them." I finished my coffee and got back on the road, but I took a different route. Added 2 hours to my trip to avoid that stretch of Highway 11. 3 weeks later, I heard on the news that another driver had been found dead near Smooth Rock Falls, frozen solid, sitting in the snow about 100 yards from his parked truck. The investigation found no explanation for why he'd left his vehicle or why he'd walked into the forest. But I knew. He'd heard a child crying, and he'd tried to help. I've driven through northern Ontario dozens of times since then, but always in daylight. Always with the windows up and the radio loud enough to drown out any sounds from outside. Because sometimes, on certain routes on certain nights, you can still hear them crying. The lost children of St. Anne's, wandering the frozen forests, calling out for help that can never come. And if you stop, if you try to help them, they'll take you into the cold with them. They'll make you one of them, still crying, still waiting, still so very, very cold. We didn't have any power issues last night. Everything ran normally. But on the camera, for those 3 minutes, it's like reality glitched. I took the printout and drove to a mechanic shop in Winnipeg. I needed to know if the handprints had damaged my trailer, if I needed to repaint, or if there was any structural issue. The mechanic, an older Ukrainian guy named Pavel, took one look at the trailer and crossed himself. "Where did you park last night?" he asked, his accent thick. "Truck stop on Highway 1, just outside the city." "Why?" He walked around the trailer, examining the handprints without touching them. "This has happened before. 3 years ago, different driver. He parked at that same truck stop. Woke up to find handprints just like these all over his trailer." "What happened to him?" Pavel's expression was grim. He kept driving, refused to believe it was anything supernatural. Said it was just a prank, just some weird coincidence. Made his delivery in Thunder Bay, started the drive back. He paused. His truck went off a bridge outside Kenora, went through the ice into the river, They pulled him out 2 days later. He was still in the cab, frozen solid. You think the handprints had something to do with it? The police report said his truck veered off the road for no apparent reason. No mechanical failure, no signs he fell asleep. Witnesses said he just drove straight off the bridge, like he was being pulled. I felt my stomach turn. What do? You get a blessing, a real one from a real priest, not some quick prayer, a full cleansing. These marks, they're not just frost. They're a claiming. Something marked your truck, and if you don't break that connection, it'll follow you. He gave me the address of a Ukrainian Orthodox church in the North End. Go now, before you drive anywhere else. I did. Father Dmitri was an ancient-looking priest who spoke broken English but seemed to understand exactly what I was describing. He came to the mechanic's shop with holy water, incense, and a Bible that looked like it was 100 years old. For 30 minutes, he walked around my truck, praying in Ukrainian, splashing holy water on the handprints, waving incense smoke over the metal. The handprints seemed to resist. The water beaded up and rolled off instead of wetting the surface, and the smoke swirled in unnatural patterns. But slowly, gradually, the prints began to fade. The dark stains lightened, then disappeared, leaving clean paint beneath. Father Dmitri finished his prayers and made the sign of the cross over the truck. "Is done," he said. "But you must be careful. They touched your truck, but they wanted to touch you. You were protected, sleeping inside cab, engine running, heat keeping them outside. But they tried. What were they? What wanted to touch me?" He looked at me with eyes that had seen too much. The frozen children. In old country, we have stories. Children who freeze to death, they become something else. Not ghosts, not demons. Something between. They are cold, always cold, and they seek warmth. They find living people and they touch them, trying to steal their warmth, their life. But the touch brings only cold. It spreads like disease. First the place they touched you, then your whole body, then your soul. You become cold inside, even when you are warm outside. And the cold makes you do things, makes you walk into winter, makes you drive off bridges into frozen rivers. Why that truck stop? Why me? Not just you. That place, it is thin. Thin between our world and the cold place where the frozen children wait. They push through, looking for warmth. Most nights, nothing happens. But some nights, when it is cold enough, when the boundaries are weak, they can reach through. You were unlucky. Or perhaps, he paused. Perhaps you were lucky. Lucky you woke up. Lucky you came here. The other driver, he did not believe. He did not come. And the cold took him. I paid Father Dmitri everything I had in my wallet, plus what I could pull from an ATM. He refused at first, but I insisted. He'd saved my life, I was sure of it. I made my delivery in Thunder Bay without incident. The trailer was clean, the handprints gone. Everything seemed normal, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed. Every time I parked overnight, I'd wake up multiple times, checking outside, making sure nothing was approaching my truck. Every truck stop felt dangerous, like something might be waiting in the darkness beyond the lights. 2 weeks later, I got a call from Pavel the mechanic. "I thought you should know," he said. "Another driver parked at that truck stop last night. Same thing happened, handprints all over his truck. But he didn't believe it was anything. Told the manager it was just kids playing pranks. He left this morning, heading east. You need to warn him." I tried. He wouldn't listen. Said he doesn't believe in superstitious bullshit. Pavel sighed. "I give him 2 days. Maybe 3 if he's lucky. We can't just let him die. What can we do? Drive after him? Force him to get a blessing? He's a grown man. He makes his choices." The driver's name was Marcus Webb. I found that out from a trucking forum where someone had posted a photo of a trailer covered in handprints, asking if anyone knew what could cause it. Marcus had responded in the comments, laughing it off, saying people were too superstitious. 5 days later, Marcus Webb's truck was found on Highway 17, parked on the shoulder east of Kenora. The engine was running, the heat was on, but Marcus was dead in his sleeper cab, frozen solid, even though the interior temperature was over 20 degrees Celsius. The coroner's report said hypothermia, but couldn't explain how someone could freeze to death inside a heated truck. There were no signs of foul play, no drugs or alcohol, no medical condition that would explain it. But I knew what had killed him. The cold had gotten inside him. Through those handprints, that claiming touch, the frozen children had reached into him and stolen his warmth bit by bit until there was nothing left. I avoid that truck stop now. I'll drive an extra hour to stop somewhere else, anywhere else. And I've warned every driver I know. If you wake up and find handprints on your truck, especially small handprints from nowhere, don't ignore them. Get a blessing. Get a cleansing. Get whatever spiritual protection you can find. Because the frozen children are real, and they're looking for warmth in this cold world. And if they mark you, if they claim you with their touch, the cold will follow you until it finally drags you down into the frozen darkness where they wait. Still reaching, still touching, still trying to steal the warmth they lost so long ago. I woke up in my sleeper cab at a truck stop outside Winnipeg with the worst feeling I've ever had. That sensation that something's wrong, that someone's been watching you while you slept. It was 6 a.m., still dark, and brutally cold. The kind of Manitoba winter morning where the world feels frozen solid. I'd pulled in around midnight after a long haul from Regina, grabbed 4 hours of sleep, and now needed to get back on the road. I went through my usual routine, started the engine to warm up, made coffee on my little portable burner, checked my phone for messages from dispatch. Then I went outside to do my pre-trip inspection. That's when I saw them. Handprints. Dozens of them, covering every inch of my trailer. Small handprints, like children's hands, pressed into the frost that had accumulated overnight. They were everywhere, on the sides, on the doors, on the back, even on the undercarriage where I could see them when I crouched down. My heart started pounding. I walked slowly around my truck, counting them. 30, 40, 50 handprints. Maybe more. They overlapped in places. A chaotic mess of small frozen palms and tiny fingers. What the hell? I whispered. The truck stop was starting to wake up. A few drivers moving around, heading to the restaurant for breakfast. I grabbed the nearest one, a middle-aged guy in a maple leaf logistics jacket. Hey, did you see anyone near my truck last night? Kids? Maybe? He looked at me funny. Kids? At a truck stop at midnight in -30 weather? No, man. Why? I showed him the handprints. His face went pale. Jesus, how did those get there? I don't know. I was sleeping. I didn't hear anything. He walked around the trailer, examining the prints. These are weird, man. Look at them. I looked closer. He was right, there was something off about them. The proportions weren't quite right. The fingers were too long, too thin. And they were pressed so hard into the metal that they'd left indentations, like whoever made them had enormous strength. You need to report this, the driver said. This is messed up. I went to the truck stop office and talked to the manager. He came out to look, took photos, and promised to check the security cameras. But even as he said it, I could see the doubt in his eyes. Doubt that the cameras would show anything useful. Doubt that there was any rational explanation. I tried to scrape the handprints off, thinking maybe it was just frost I could brush away. But they wouldn't budge. The frost was frozen hard, bonded to the metal like it had been there for years instead of hours. Then the sun came up, and something even stranger happened. As the morning light hit the trailer and the metal slowly warmed, the frost started to melt. But the handprints didn't fade, they got darker. They were staining the paint beneath like acid eating into the finish. This isn't possible, I muttered, running my hand over one of the prints. The metal felt wrong. Too cold, even as the sun warmed everything else. The truck stop manager came back with a printout from the security footage. You're not going to like this. He showed me the image. It was grainy black and white footage from a camera pointed at the parking lot. My truck was visible, parked in the corner. The timestamp showed 3:47 a.m., and around my truck were figures. Small figures, maybe a dozen of them, surrounding the trailer. The image quality was too poor to make out details, but they were clearly child-sized, and they were all reaching toward the truck, hands pressed against it. Who the hell are these kids? I demanded. And where did they come from? The manager shook his head. I don't know. I watched the whole footage from midnight to 6 a.m. These figures just appear at 3:47. 1 second the truck is alone, the next second they're there. And they stay for exactly 3 minutes. Then they're gone. Just blink out of existence. That's impossible. The camera must have glitched. Maybe, but look at this. He pointed to other vehicles in the frame. See that pickup truck? Watch the timestamp. I watched. At 3:47, the pickup's headlights flickered. So did the lights on the truck stop building. Everything flickered for exactly 3 minutes, then returned to normal. Power surge. I suggested weakly.